The only time I ever hitchhiked before was when I had just turned 21, and I got ridiculously drunk at a party that was about 2 hours away from my house. The party was huge and out of control, and at some point, I lost my friends and had to hitch a ride. The guy who picked me up was super nice, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was terrified. What I was doing was dangerous. So, we talked most of the ride, and I didn't get bad vibes, but I was wasted and exhausted. I eventually found myself drifting off and tried to stop it, but couldn't. I fell asleep. I startled awake and my heart sank as I looked around at how isolated we were. We were way off the highway, pulled over in a very private country setting. He then proceeds to yell at me for falling asleep, because God knows what he could have done if he were a psychopath. This was my first hitchhiking experience ever, so it taught me a great lesson. He continues back to the highway and drives us to my house. When he dropped me off at my place, he looked at me and said, "Seriously, please, don't ever do this again. You're fixing to get yourself killed. Girl, I could have killed you like 10 times already." I laughed, nervously, and thanked him for the ride again. He looked me dead in my eyes and said, "Another thing, never hitch a ride directly to your place. Now I know where you live." I was drunk and exhausted and heavily disappointed in myself. I should have known better. I thanked him again for the ride and the advice. Then I jokingly thanked him for not killing me. He chuckled and said, "Well, all right, get inside before I change my mind or decide to come back and do it later." I scrambled out of the car with another nervous laugh that I couldn't stop from coming. I'm pretty sure he was joking, but even serial killers can be funny. In any event, I never plan to hitchhike again. I was at the Welcome Center in western Kansas City. It was high summer at that point, so the skies were clear, the weather was hot, and I was in a hurry to get to California. I was ready to rendezvous with some fellow travelers, so I was eager to get a good ride on I-70 through the entire state, and tried to ply my trade skillfully. I relaxed, pulled out a book, sat on my drum, and waited patiently, as that method had always seemed to work for me in the past. It wasn't a very busy welcome center, so I didn't see a ton of traffic getting onto the highway, and no one was interested in stopping for me. Things went on like this for several hours, and I was starting to get impatient, and a bit sunburnt. The highs by that point in the day were closing in on the mid-90s, and I was sucking water down like crazy. Thankfully, I was at the Welcome Center, so I could fill my gallon jug up anytime I needed to. After a fill-up, I went back to my spot near the on-ramp, and to my surprise, someone pulled over right as I got my stuff. It looked to be a middle-aged man. I ran up to the car and pulled open the passenger door as I asked how far he was going. And as I looked down, I noticed not only was he standing at attention, but he was unsheathed. I slammed the door shut, flipped him off, and kicked his car door. He drove off slowly and finally sped up to merge onto the highway. Now, as you can imagine, this freaked me out just a bit, but being the avid wanderer that I am, I put it behind me and concentrated on not looking freaked out, as that makes people even less likely to pull over for you. So I got back to work acting like I didn't care and pulled out my book again. The hours ticked by once again, and the day got hotter. I got even more stressed out, and it surely showed on my face because I was getting looks from people who were passing by. So I decided to take a break for a while and get some shade. Therein lied another problem. There was no shade. There's not a ton of shade at the Kansas Welcome Center, so the only place I could find was beside a dumpster. Still, I managed to catch a nap, and when I woke up, the sun was nearing the western horizon. Still a couple hours of good light left in the day, though, so I decided to head back towards the on-ramp. After just a few minutes, a car pulled over, and of course, it was the one that had pulled over earlier in the day. This time, I was just mad, hot and mad. So I stormed up to the door and said, "What do you want?" very aggressively. He just looked at me, then winked. and I blew up. I screamed, "Get the hell away from me and don't come back. I have a knife, you maniac." In hindsight, that probably wasn't a very good idea, but I was pissed, and the floodgates were opened. I kicked his door as hard as I could and stomped back to my stuff, trying to exude power and confidence. Again, he pulled away slowly, and this time I got his license plate number and wrote it down. So I tried to keep my wits about me, but at this point, to avoid him coming back again, I started to actively hitchhike. And I didn't care at this point if I got a long ride or a short ride. I just didn't want that man to find me a third time. It wasn't long before a young lady pulled over, and I walked to her car while her passenger window rolled down. Once I got there, I bent down with a fake smile on my face and asked in a light and airy tone, "How far are you going, miss?" She smiles kindly and says, "Honestly, I'm not going where you are. But I've noticed that you've been here all day and would love to offer you a hot meal." At this point, I am so relieved a real smile cracks through the fake one I was putting on. I told her that would be awesome. After the day that I had, a hot meal sounds wonderful. She sighed and told me to grab my stuff, put it in the trunk, and hop in. We headed to the next ramp, turned around, and found some diner on the edge of KC. We had a nice conversation, and I found out she was a dancer at a club working her way through college. Very nice girl, and much friendlier than I would have expected for a girl picking up a hitchhiker. But I was extremely grateful, and when she dropped me off at the welcome center, she gave me a hug and wished me good luck. At this point, it's nighttime, and I never hitchhike at night, so I walk off into the high grass behind the welcome center and try to be as inconspicuous as possible as I lay down to get some sleep. I didn't sleep great, but I did sleep through the night. So when I woke in the morning, even though I wasn't recharged, at least I was a little refreshed. So I tried not to dwell on most of the day. So I decided not to focus on everything that happened the day before and went back out to my previous spot to try again to make it to California. My friends and I were in Yellowknife, Canada some years back, and we were looking to hitch a ride about 100 kilometers out of town, where we had already stashed our canoes and supplies for a big trip to the ocean. We started walking, hoping for a ride, instead of having to walk the whole way there overnight, especially when rain was expected. A minivan pulls up, and this 30-year-old lady tells us to get in. It was weird that a solo lady was telling a group of people to get in her car, but we weren't about to say no, especially with the rain coming. One of the guys sits up front with her, and the rest of us pile in the back. She was a little touchy-feely with my friend in the front seat. She would casually touch him quite a bit while talking. She'd stroke his hair and arms, and even rested her arm across his thigh, as she went on and on about how wonderful we are and how we showed up right on time, how she's on her way to go visit her relatives in Alaska right now. She tells us how much of a lifesaver we are, which was strange under the circumstances. And then she doesn't stop talking for the next hour. She spent some time telling us that she had a son who she hated, who made her life miserable. But with a little smile, she would look into the rearview mirror and say that he's no trouble now, no trouble at all anymore. When she said it, she wasn't looking at us in the rearview mirror. She was more looking in the back towards her luggage in the van. She also mentioned quite a few times that the RCMP considered her to be trouble and were after her. She went on and on about Alaska and how things were going to die down soon and how Alaska would be a safer place for her. This whole conversation was weird. We were nervous and tense, sitting in the car with the woman that the police were actively in pursuit of. And this entire time, she wouldn't stop petting my friend, his shoulder, his arms. Eventually, she began to stroke his leg, all while continuing to casually speak to us. My friend would shift uncomfortably and inch away from her, but she didn't seem to notice that he was uncomfortable, or she didn't care. She had these crazy eyes and a gravelly voice, and kept nervously smiling and laughing. We eventually get to our drop point and jump out as fast as we can. But the rest of our crew is making dinner, see this nice lady that dropped us off, and invites her to eat with us. We're in the middle of nowhere, it's late, and all of us that were in that car with her, we don't want to have anything to do with her anymore. So my guy friend that sat up in the front seat with her kept telling her that actually we were running low on food, and kept sort of pushing her to quickly make her way to Alaska. The woman eventually does drive off after thanking us again for being such great lifesavers, which made us wonder, were the police really after her? Were they looking for a single woman driving alone and we helped her get away? Helped her escape? But our other friends who were not in the car with her convinced us that we were over-exaggerating. But we were afraid, especially our guy friend who she kept fondling in the front seat. He was uncomfortable. What if she came back and crawled into his tent? However, our friends did calm us down and we decided to stay the night. She never did come back, but every time we heard a noise that night, we'd look over our shoulders, thinking she'd be there.